UUFR be, or is it already a DIY community, one where all feel ownership and are engaged? Or is it a more typical organized community where there's a very structured activity?
Yeah, I'm going to say I don't want to say disorganized because it isn't, but it is not a typical hierarchy. I taught in Catholic school for 25 years. Trust me, this is much easier. And I think it's great because we're all sort of equal. When you think of it that way.
She and I are both members of the VIA,
Right.
Village Improvement Association. And I've never run across an organization of volunteers that works so smoothly.
Yeah,
And
it's amazing.
it is beyond what I've ever expected.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work, but a lot of people have 80, how many? No.
I am guessing 60.
60.
I'm not sure.
So that's about the same size as this.
Yeah.
And I would say it's more than 20% that participate. It's probably closer to 50 or 60% that really get out there on the ground, boots on the ground, which is unusual. But it is a live-in community where it's 24/7. And so there's more to it than something like this. But when you consider the fact that we do everything from keeping the building going to programs to budgets and finances to helping people who are in need of help, reaching outside the community. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot for people to get involved in on a very diverse level. And so if you don't want to be involved in the immediate surroundings, then there's the larger community to be involved in. And I think it's got a lot to offer for that kind of freedom to be involved in ways you don't. Like somebody does the little book closet, the free library. Well, and I just love that. And I think that's kind of the thing where you can get involved in small things that make a big difference. That's really cool.
And again, I think in general, to me, words are just words, and I like action. But in this case, I think team sounds better than committees. Mm-hmm. Committee sounds like blah, 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 blah. And that is, and lots of meetings. Mm-hmm. And I think team sounds, we are doing something together.
The first question is, should UUFR be, or is it already? And you're not writing answers anymore. I was interested to know it's kind of taking the temperature on what we feel about community. So at the end, if you have other things you want to, at the end of the discussion group, you may want to jot down some other suggestions, and we would welcome that as well. Because while we are exploring communities, but let's be true, we're actually talking about UUFR. How are we? It's sort of like when I used to do training, I always had an overhead that said, how are we doing? A little circle. How can we do better? And then it became a trajectory. And this is used, it's not a trick that was personal to me. It's in a lot of organizational structures. But each time you ask the question and you answer it, you just get better. And so as you ask it the second time, the third time, your growth just grows exponentially as you're exploring. So this is kind of taking our temperature. How are we doing? How can we do better? And if we're fine, then that's good too. I think we are good. So should UUFR be, or is it already a DIY community, one where all feel ownership and are engaged, or a more typical organized community? Is it best led in a hierarchical fashion or a cooperative fashion? So, those are two different ways, and there are ways in between. But what is your take on where we are right now in terms of um, community involvement from the bottom up, our organization from the top down? This is not a lemon squeeze, this, but it's not. It'll be good to hear some answers.
I have no desire. I have been, well, modify it slightly. When I teach, I'm happy to be a leader, but most of the time I want to be a team player. So if I see a group or a structure that appeals to me, uh, it doesn't matter whether it's a co-op kind of thing or hierarchical. It has to do with, am I willing to do it, and how much time am I willing to give it, and how enthusiastic and how supportive can I be? So I think that for us, melding the two is probably where we need to be right now.
I've been a member for about a year now, and there's been a lot of stuff I see, a lot of red tape that I see in corporate America, where things get squashed and people can't do the programs they want to do. We're a very small group. Communities like this, everybody who has a passion for something, my passions, just do them. And if there's a problem, um, people can say, let's squash it down. But I've been seeing a lot of stuff that's built around fear of people not liking us, fear of this happening, fear of that happening. And then things get squashed a little. And if we just work as a group and we do the things that we have passion for, things will get done and we'll have a good time doing it. Yeah. And but that's a problem though too, because your passions go in a lot of spaces, and then I become leaders in things I'm not really versed at, like technology, right? but we do what we can do, and if you have passion, it goes great. If you're doing something because you have to do it, and you volunteer for something that you don't want to do, then there's no passion behind it, and it doesn't really go far.
Elaine asked me when she was working on this was, what's the UUFR organization chart? And I says, we don't have one. I had drawn something, but reality, we've got different groups doing different things. And we try to sort of keep in touch with each other. And that's part of what the board does, to sort of keep us all in touch with each other. But a lot of that communication goes on committee to committee, or individual to individual. And I think that's...
Which was one of my frustrating things when I came on board the board, because I was like, one committee doesn't know what the other committee is doing, and you've got cross paths going on, and things being printed out in one on chalice that aren't getting printed out on another one, or the wrong dates or the wrong times. And I'm like, wait a minute, something's not working. And then I started to realize, well, we just started this, A, and B is that, everything has its hiccups in the beginning. But over time, it's resolved itself. And so giving it permission to be what it is as much an important element to leadership as anything else in the leadership roles. You have to let things work. Our grandson's in the Marine Corps, and he's rising up in his ranks, and he's doing great jobs, but he lets his men do their thing, and that's how the team works. They have to do that. They have to be organic, even though they're super structured. They have to be organic at the same time.
For those of you who don't know, the comment is new. This year is the first time we've changed our board and governance structure, where in the past, committee chairs met with the board. Some of them required to meet with the board, some of them if you want to meet with the board. And we switched that this year, and let the committee chairs run with a few guidelines, and not having to come and ask the board for certain things that they were doing a lot before. So, yeah, we did have some stumbles at first when they didn't realize they could go ahead and do things. They kept asking, That's okay. If it's in your budget and it matches our covenant and our way that we want to live, then go ahead and do it. And some of the committees have just jumped right in, and some of them are still treading water. And then we have some committees, groups, teams, whatever. We actually have one that's called a team, which is the communications team, because there is no chair. There's just a group of people, and they all work individually on their unique aspects of communication, but there's not somebody telling them, you do this and you do that. So do you prefer a structured, organized way of doing things, or a more generic, organic kind of approach to things?
Yeah, two.
Organic.
Some structure is necessary. I'm kind of a structured person, but I also like the freedom. And if you have too much structure, then you lose that freedom. So you need to have both.
Yeah, we have to have a structure and put a budget together. I know if we're gonna make it through the year. But once you get the budget, then we can say to people,
Right.
The other thing I would say, that in an open organization, communication is much more important than it is in a hierarchical. And people have to really work at communicating across the boundaries and what have you. Because in a hierarchical, you just get told what to do. Where you're making decisions, you need to communicate across the boundaries.
In terms of programs and membership, I think need a lot of communication. I think to me, there's a lot of cross-pollination that can happen there. So, not so much like with building and grounds, because they're kind of self-contained. But programs is what we're all about, and membership is what we want to keep the people so we can be all what it's all about.
Is that committees are really important. I mean, that's what we rely upon. Rely on the membership committee, rely on the program committee, rely on building and grounds. That's what makes the whole system work. And yeah, the board can sort of come up with some very general policies, but basically it's nice out there because we've got Sharon and we got Buddy to do the building and grounds. We've got programs because Karen's been involved and Diana's been involved. That's the reason the whole system works. So to the extent people want to become a part of that, get involved in those committees. Whether we're going to call them a team or whatever we're going to call them, but that's where the fun is.
Think I'll just put this me personally that I think COVID really hit us hard as people trying to keep the fellowship thriving. And I'm very proud of what we did. We were able to be creative and keep people coming and serving a need for the community. So I think that is really great. But it was very draining because we had to put a whole lot of extra energy and there was a lot of fear associated with that to try to keep things going. I started to feel not too long ago like I needed to create a support group for everybody who felt like I don't want to do that anymore. And I joked around about it, but I mean, it was a thing for me. And then we had a focus group meeting, and the words of Dave Rowden just still ring in my mind of how the fellowship is a community, and the only way that the fellowship can thrive and endure is for individuals to want to serve. And that is where the idea of service as a spiritual practice came into my mind and into being. And he also made me start thinking about how our what we ask of people needs to be um, a smaller ask so that you can feel more interested in saying, yes, I can do that one thing. Maybe it's a one-time thing, or maybe it's a small thing to kind of make the whole committee work and thrive. And then something happened. People started responding to those small asks. I mean, I had people come up after the service and say, "I know a speaker," or I'll speak on that. I'll have a subject that I want to speak on, and bringing me ideas. And so I felt very encouraged that just about, I think every time I've had a small ask, something has come from that. So it has helped me become more energized. And the other thing that has happened is we've had more people join the program committee. And I have this hope that maybe I can reinstall a vision that I had when I first took on the job, which was to have a program chair who was the coordinator, not the person who ended up having to take care of so many moving parts. And that if we can divide the moving parts into smaller, manageable tasks, and we have a team of people who will say, I can do that part, or I can do that part, then it's not so hard to be the program chair, the voice of the committee. So this whole topic has evolved a lot for me in, I would say, just the past 3 months.
I think you have to do things in a way that people want to be involved in. And maybe it's our organic structure that invites people in, or maybe it's that pushes people away. You know, everybody's an individual. They all have their own comfort level in working with other people. We've offered, and I've heard this all over, do you want to work alone or do you want to work with a partner? And how would you like to do this and that? And invariably, whatever choice they make, that's the way it is. And some do better as partners and some do better individually. So I don't know if there's a single answer to getting larger than 20% involvement in whatever you want to call it, leadership goals or whatever. But I think the biggest concern I have is offering too many choices, too many committable things. That means that the one person who raises their hand gets 100% of the responsibility. I think that scares people away. I've heard that more often than not. And I think that, I'm very fortunate to work on the building and grounds team because it is an amazing team of people. And we all pitch in, we all do our thing. And in an hour to 2 hours, we get a lot done. But it is an interesting committee because we're locked in on a goal, and it's one location. So many things that happen around here happen in many different directions in many different locations. So
Is an issue,
Right now.
getting everybody's caring circles to provide the food for their month. I know in ours, Sharon says, I mean, she does pretty well getting everybody to participate, but that's not true in all caring circles. And I do think, I think it's important to get together after the service, but you know, if one person has to do the food for the whole month,
Right.
that's not fair. And that's where we need to encourage people to, I mean, they don't have to cook the food, go buy some cookies or something, you know, just,
A little ask.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, there are different ways to do things. I know some churches where their coffee and conversation time, they take out of their budget, and they have to put in their budget to buy 5 packs of cookies every Sunday, you know, kind of thing. And they don't ask people to bring. And back when I was in membership, we talked about that several times and said, it doesn't feel right. One, we don't have a whole lot of money to go around anyway. But then if, you know, part of bringing the food gets people here, gets them engaged. They stay a little longer in the coffee because they gotta do the cleanup, you know, all those kind of things.
And the thing is easier, but I mean, when I write an email, who is going to sign up for this? It's Sue. And then, so when I see him, I say to him, would you like to help on then and then? And then they cannot say no, so they say, okay. So the personal approach is working a little bit less.
Yeah. I think it's important too to keep it simple.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because if you make it that, somebody's gonna do this big spread, and the next person is gonna feel like they have to, it's like that luncheon kind of thing that
Right.
goes into a cocktail party afterwards. But, I think that's important too, just whatever you can do. And, I learned one valuable lesson, and I don't know if I can speak for you, but you go speak for yourself. We did greeting and food at the same time. That's not too smart. Because you're trying to, be back and forth between two places. So if I would say, it'd be better to just do the food and then be a greeter another time, trying to do it both at the same time. The first time was a little hairy for me, so.
I found that with security, I think I sign up for security first, and then we get the notice for the food or for greeting, and I always put it on that same day, and I'm like, wait a minute.
But greeting and security works pretty good
It
together.
does.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
But greeting and refreshments, not security and refreshments.
Which means that my Sue usually ends up with the food.
I heard from Hanukkah, she prefers team versus committee. Where are the rest of you?
Teamworks.
Team.
Sounds a
I
little more
like
casual.
team.
Okay.
I like
Softer, maybe, it sounds softer.
Yeah, less formal and less.
Yeah.
Are you better working in large teams or small teams?
Small.
I think small is
Small,
Yeah.
preferable because then your line of communication
Yeah.
is more
easily.
coalesced.
So if we need a lot of people to get some big thing done, it might be better to break it up into small things and have a smaller group of folks do
Yeah,
things.
and maybe committee is a nice word for the umbrella of a group of teams, so that there's a chairman of the committee that helps to organize what the teams can do. But
Found, and one of the hopeful things we had as we restructured the board last time, where we had committee chairs and a lot of ad hoc members and everything, if everybody said their say, it was board meeting for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And you don't need a 3-hour meeting, drive me crazy. So we cut back the numbers, and some people like that. Some people say, well, I'm not as involved anymore, so I don't know what's going on everywhere. It's like, okay,
Join the board.
join the board, join the challenge,
Anybody can come to a board meeting.
Oh, yeah, and they're not closed, except if we go into executive committee session, which only happens maybe once every 2 years, that we have to do that. But people can come, if they want to hear what's going on. Also, the board minutes are in the foyer in a booklet, and anytime you want to see what happens in the board, you can read that. I'll go, oh, God, I'm glad I'm not involved in this.
It is, like you might want bigger teams for certain things.
Yeah, certainly. If you're trying to replace the light bulbs in here, which the building and grounds group has to do, 2 people, one for the ladder and one for get up. But if you're out there working on moving rocks, which we did a few
Yes.
months ago.
And washing. Don't
And
forget,
washing
we have
those rocks,
washing.
yes.
And-
Having on people's
And
goods.
just for everybody else's edification, that when you try to conquer one project out there or in here, there's usually 3 or 4 pre-projects that have to get done before you can do that project.
Yes.
And so the team might need some team help. I don't know how you want to word that, but,
General contractor.
well,
Or
yeah.
you may need a specialist that comes in.
I mean, somebody takes the lead on a project, then that person has to have helpers to help make sure that all the things getting up to that point get done in time to get that done. And that's a lot of coordination.
Yeah.
Any project requires that.
That's one of the things we're working on right at the moment is, if we're gonna put a budget together, we need all the various committees, teams, whatever we call them, to submit what they think they need to make their coming year. So you got a lot of inputs that come in and they have to all be ready at the time you sit down at the table. And then on the other side, you gotta have something about, okay, how much money do we have to spend on all these things people want to do? And that is the work that's recently been done with what we call the giving letter, asking people, what do you think you can give next year? So that we have some idea whether we're gonna have $70,000 or $50,000. And it changes what we can do.
And for as much as we do as a group organization, the amount of money we use to make that happen is very small.
I've heard a lot of good words here. Team, where are we going? These kinds of things. One of the reasons I backed away is because this organization needs to address all of its needs, and it can't be as dependent upon very few people. Now, what's different with today's UUFR? Selene and others have mentioned how much we've accomplished here. Selene had mentioned how much we have accomplished here over the last 25 years. One of the things, well, and I've led a lot of teams doing a lot of stuff. One of the things is that we had a vision and planning organization that defined in some detail where we wanted to be 10 years into the future. And then we set up a 5-year plan to how we would make that progress. And then we had a series of benchmarks that we watched and monitored as we made progress towards that vision. And that vision was in significant detail. So recently, over the last 6 or 7 years, I have not heard where we're headed 10 years from now, what we would like this place to be 10 years from now. And my experience has always been, once you define where you're headed, that excites people. They want to be a part of it. And when we built this initial building, we had participation probably 70%. From a financial standpoint, 95%, but from an actual hands-on, 70% or so would be here doing things because they had a vision, they understood where we were going. And beyond that, as we developed our making a measurable change in the community, that became the vision. And we had a lot of participation. And right now, I don't know if all of us have a common vision of what we want UUFR to be in some significant detail 10 years into this future. So where are we going? As you said,
Okay, it's your taking
where are we
the
going?
mic over. It's 11:30, but let's keep.
Right, we need a vision and planning, and I'm responsible for the vision and planning project, and we do have a draft of it. And here's some things on it. We want an RE program. and we want a program for kids, and we want to get kids to come, and we want an adult education program, some things that I think when the board develops it, then we'll share it with everyone. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to do that. But it's something to talk about. If we can get to a point where, most everyone financially participates to a certain level, I think we will have sort of reached a benchmark, a threshold, and we can build on that.
Since we are already over time, we're going to do a combination of extinguishing the chalice and closing words. And the chalice is beginning to get a little low on itself here. This is called the work we share. It is our work shared with each other in covenant that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. And the light of this faith lives on in us, together in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Amen. Blessed be.